My name is Robert Hale. I am 68 years old. And 3 weeks ago, my daughter told me to stop calling. She didn't say it in anger. That was the part that broke me. She said it calmly, like she was reading it off a piece of paper. "Dad, please stop calling us. We need space." Then she hung up before I could answer. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone for a long time. The house was quiet. My wife Margaret passed 4 years ago, and since then, the phone calls to my children were the only thing that made the evenings feel less empty. I have 2 children. Daniel is 41, Claire is 38. I raised them alone after Margaret got sick, worked 2 jobs to keep the house, paid for Daniel's college and Claire's wedding. I never once asked them for anything back. I just wanted to hear their voices on Sunday nights. I set the phone down on the counter and looked at the calendar hanging by the fridge. I had circled every Sunday in red ink, a habit from years ago. Margaret used to laugh at me for it. "You don't need a reminder to call your own children, Robert," she'd say. But I liked circling it anyway. It gave the week a shape. That Sunday, for the first time in 20 years, I didn't call. I sat in my recliner and stared at the television without really watching it. Around 8 o'clock, I picked up the phone again, just to see if maybe Daniel would call me instead. He didn't. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store for no real reason. I just needed to be around people. The owner, Frank, has known me for 30 years. He asked how the kids were doing. I told him they were fine. I didn't tell him the truth. I didn't know how to say it out loud yet. That night, I found an old photo album in the hall closet. Daniel at 7, missing his front teeth, holding up a fish he caught with me at the lake. Claire at 5, asleep on my shoulder after her dance recital. I sat on the floor of the hallway for an hour, looking through pages I hadn't opened in years. I want to be clear about something. I am not a perfect father. I made mistakes. I worked too much when they were young. I missed a few birthdays because of job sites out of state. But I never once turned my back on them. Not when Daniel dropped out of his first college and needed help starting over. Not when Claire's first marriage fell apart and she needed a place to stay for 6 months. So when she told me to stop calling, I didn't understand what I had done. It started 2 months earlier, at a dinner I hosted for Claire's birthday. My son-in-law, Mitchell, had just closed on a new house, a big one, out past the golf course. He mentioned it 3 times during dinner. Daniel seemed quiet that night, quieter than usual. After dinner, while Claire was in the kitchen, Daniel pulled me aside on the back porch. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Have you thought about what happens to the house? After you're gone, I mean." I remember feeling a small chill even though it was warm outside. "I have a will, Daniel. Everything's handled. Your mother and I set it up years ago." "I know. I just wondered if maybe it needed updating. Things change." I didn't think much of it at the time. I told him I'd look into it, mostly to end the conversation. I didn't like talking about my death at my daughter's birthday party. But looking back now, that was the first crack in the door. 2 weeks after that dinner, Claire started calling more often. That should have made me happy. But the calls felt different. She'd ask questions she'd never asked before. Did I keep up with the property taxes? Did I still have all my paperwork from the divorce settlement Margaret's sister went through? Did I know a good estate lawyer, or would I want to use the one Mitchell's family used? I told her I was fine, that I'd handled my own affairs my whole life and didn't need help now. She got quiet on the phone after that. Then Daniel started mentioning Mitchell's business. Mitchell was starting some kind of investment fund, something about real estate development outside the city. Daniel said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and that Mitchell was letting family in early, before it opened to outside investors. I told him I wasn't interested in investing. I'm retired. I live on a fixed income and my savings, modest as they are meant to last me the rest of my life. I didn't want to gamble them on a real estate scheme run by a man I barely trusted with my daughter's happiness, let alone my money. Daniel didn't argue. He just said, "Okay, Dad, just think about it," and changed the subject. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a law office downtown, one I didn't recognize. Inside was a request, polite but formal, asking me to consider updating my estate plan and offering a free consultation. Attached was a business card. Mitchell's name was handwritten on the back with a note. "Dad, give them a call when you get a chance. No pressure, just want everything to be smooth for the family." I sat at my kitchen table holding that letter for a long time. I am not a foolish man. I spent 30 years managing budgets and negotiating contracts before I retired. I know what it looks like when someone is trying to get ahead of something. And this looked exactly like that. I didn't call the lawyer. I put the letter in a drawer and didn't mention it to anyone, but something in me had changed. I started paying closer attention. The following Sunday, I invited Daniel and Claire over for dinner, the way I used to when Margaret was alive. I cooked pot roast, her recipe, the one she used every year on my birthday. I wanted it to feel normal again. Halfway through dinner, Claire brought up the will again. This time she wasn't subtle about it. "Dad, we just think it makes sense to talk to someone." Things happen. Nobody's getting younger. I'm 68, Claire. Not 90. I know. It's not about that. It's just responsible planning. Daniel jumped in, especially with the house. If something happened to you, we'd want things to be simple. No court stuff, no fighting. I set my fork down. Is that what this is about? You think you and your sister are going to fight over what I leave behind? Neither of them answered right away. Claire looked at her plate. Daniel looked at me, and for a second I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not concern, calculation. "We just want to protect the family," Claire finally said. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that. I'll think about it." But I didn't mean it. Something inside me had gone cold and quiet, the way it does right before you understand something you don't want to understand. It rained hard that night after they left. I stood at the front window and watched their taillights disappear down the street. The house felt bigger than usual, the way it always did when it was just me and the sound of rain on the roof. I thought about Margaret. I thought about the promise I made her before she died, that I would take care of the kids, that I would keep the family together no matter what. I wondered what she would think of tonight's conversation. I wondered if she would have seen it coming faster than I did. I didn't sleep well that night. 3 days later, Claire called again. This time there was no small talk. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it before you answer. Go ahead. Would you consider putting the house in a trust, with me and Daniel as co-trustees, just to make things easier later?" I felt my hand tighten around the phone. "Claire, why does this feel like it's coming from Mitchell and not from you?" There was a long pause. "It's not just Mitchell. Daniel and I talked about it too. So you're telling me my own children want control of my house while I'm still living in it?" "That's not what I said, Dad. That's what it sounds like." The silence on the line stretched out for what felt like a full minute. "Maybe we shouldn't talk about this over the phone," she finally said. "Maybe you shouldn't ask me to sign away my house over the phone," I said back. She hung up. I sat in the dark that night with the photo album open in my lap again, Daniel with his missing teeth, Claire asleep on my shoulder. I thought about every sacrifice, every late shift, every dollar I saved so they'd never want for anything. And I thought about the letter still sitting in my kitchen drawer, the one from the lawyer Mitchell had picked out for me. I made a decision that night. If my children wanted to talk about my estate, we would talk about it. But not on their terms, and not with their lawyer. I would find my own. 3 days later, Claire called one more time. Her voice was tight, like she'd been arguing with someone before she dialed my number. "Dad, I think it's best if you stop calling us for a while. We need space to figure some things out." I asked her what things. She didn't answer. "Fine," I said quietly. "I won't call." I hung up the phone, walked to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out the letter with the lawyer's business card. I turned it over in my hand, looking at Mitchell's handwriting one more time. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a different number. Not the lawyer Mitchell had chosen for me. My own. The lawyer's name was Evelyn Marsh. I found her through an old colleague from my last job, a man named Gerald who had used her when his own father passed. He told me she was sharp, honest, and didn't waste time. That was exactly what I needed. Her office called back the next morning and set an appointment for that Thursday. I remember hanging up the phone and feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not happiness, just steadiness, like I was standing on solid ground again instead of sinking sand. I want to go back for a moment though, because to understand how we got here, you need to understand who we were before. Margaret and I bought this house in 1986. Small at the time, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a yard just big enough for a swing set. I was working construction back then, long hours, dirt under my nails every night. Margaret taught 2nd grade. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and we had Daniel, who came along 2 years after we moved in, and Claire, who followed 4 years after that. I coached Daniel's Little League team for 6 years. I never missed a game, even the ones on the other side of the county after a 10-hour shift. Claire danced from the time she could walk, and I built her a small stage in the backyard out of scrap wood so she could perform for the neighborhood kids. Margaret used to say I spoiled them both, but she never once tried to stop me. When Daniel turned 18, he wanted to go to college out of state, a school we couldn't really afford. I took a second job at a hardware distributor, nights and weekends, so he wouldn't have to take out loans. He graduated with a business degree and a promise to make me proud. Claire married young, at 23, to a man named Peter who turned out to be unfaithful within the first 2 years. When she found out, she called me at midnight, crying so hard I could barely understand her. I drove 3 hours that same night to bring her home. She lived with us for 6 months while she got back on her feet. I never once made her feel like a burden. I tell you all this not to boast, but because I need you to understand something. Everything I did without expecting anything in return. That's what makes the last 2 months so hard to accept. Margaret got sick when Claire was 26 and Daniel was 29. Ovarian cancer. It moved fast, 18 months from diagnosis to the funeral. I remember the last conversation we had in the hospital, 3 days before she passed. She held my hand and said, "Robert, promise me you'll keep this family together. Whatever happens, however hard it gets, don't let them drift from you. Don't let them drift from each other." I promised her. I meant it. With everything I had, for the first year after she died, I threw myself into being present. Sunday dinners, birthday calls. I drove 2 hours to watch Daniel's company softball games, even though he never asked me to come. I flew out for Claire's second wedding to Mitchell and gave a toast that made half the room cry. Mitchell seemed like a good man in the beginning, confident, well-spoken, ambitious. He worked in real estate development, always talking about his next big project. I liked him well enough at first. It wasn't until the last year or so that I started noticing things. Little things. At first, he'd make comments about my house being a lot of space for one person. He asked once, half joking, what I planned to do with it eventually. I laughed it off at the time. Old habits, I told myself. Real estate people talk about property the way doctors talk about symptoms. It's just how their brain works, but the comments kept coming. At Thanksgiving last year, he mentioned that property values in my neighborhood had gone up nearly 40% since I bought the place. He said it like it was casual conversation, but I noticed Claire didn't meet my eyes when he said it. Around that same time, Daniel started asking me strange questions too. Did I still have life insurance? Was my mortgage paid off? Had I ever considered downsizing? I told myself I was being paranoid. These were my children. They loved me. I refused to believe they were circling like vultures. Thursday came, and I drove downtown to meet Evelyn Marsh. Her office was small but tidy, books lined up neatly, a framed photo of her own family on the desk. She had sharp eyes and a firm handshake. "Tell me what's going on, Mr. Hale," she said, settling into her chair. I told her everything. The dinner conversations, the letter from Mitchell's chosen lawyer, the phone call asking me to stop calling my own children. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set her pen down. "Mr. Hale, I want to be direct with you. What you're describing has patterns I've seen before. Family members positioning themselves ahead of an inheritance, sometimes without even fully realizing what they're doing. Sometimes very much realizing it, so what do? First, we protect what's yours. Your house, your savings, your decisions. No one updates your estate plan but you, on your terms, with your lawyer. Second, we find out exactly what's been happening behind the scenes. I have a colleague who can look into the business your son-in-law is running. If there's something concerning there, we should know about it before your family gets any deeper involved." I felt my chest tighten. "You think this is about more than just the house?" Evelyn looked at me carefully. "I think it's worth finding out, Mr. Hale. I'd rather you know the truth now than be surprised by it later." We spent the next hour going over my finances, my current will, the deed to the house. Evelyn asked sharp, careful questions, the kind that made me realize how little I actually knew about Mitchell's business, despite hearing about it at every family gathering for the past year. Before I left, she handed me her card. "Call me the moment anything changes. And Mr. Hale, don't sign anything. Not a letter, not a form, Not even something that seems harmless. If anyone puts a paper in front of you, you call me first. I told her I would. Driving home that afternoon, I felt something shift inside me. For weeks I had been the one absorbing blows, wondering what I had done wrong, aching over a silence I didn't understand. Now, for the first time, I felt like I was doing something instead of just waiting to be heard again. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something told me to pick up. It was a woman's voice, hesitant at first. "Mr. Hale, my name is Patricia. I used to work with Mitchell Reyes. I think there's something you need to know about the investment fund your family's been talking about." My stomach dropped. "I'm listening," I said. "I don't have much time," she said. "But I think you should ask your daughter where the money for the down payment on their new house actually came from." The line went dead before I could ask another question. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, my hands trembling slightly, the quiet of the house pressing in around me. Whatever I thought I understood about my family 2 months ago felt further away than ever. I picked up the phone and called Evelyn Marsh. "I think we need to talk again," I said. "Something just happened." Evelyn agreed to see me the next morning. I barely slept that night, running Patricia's words over and over in my head. "Ask your daughter where the money for the down payment actually came from." I didn't know this woman. I didn't know if I could trust a stranger who called out of nowhere and vanished just as fast. But something in her voice had been urgent, scared even. When I sat down across from Evelyn, I told her everything Patricia had said, word for word. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, thinking. "Do you have a last name for this, Patricia? A number she called from?" "No last name. The number came up as unknown. I tried calling it back. It's disconnected." "That's not unusual for someone trying to stay hidden," Evelyn said. "But it does tell us something. If a former employee is reaching out anonymously to warn a family member, there's likely something in that business worth being warned about." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. "I had my associate do some preliminary digging after our last meeting. I wasn't going to bring it up until I had more, but given this call, I think you should see it now." She slid a few printed pages across the desk. It was a summary of public filings tied to Mitchell's investment fund, something called Highland Ridge Development Partners. "Your son-in-law raised money from at least 11 investors over the past year," Evelyn said. "Most of them small amounts, $5,000 to $20,000. Family friends, people from his old company, a few relatives. The fund was supposed to be developing a piece of land outside the city for a retail plaza. Construction was supposed to break ground 8 months ago. Has it? No permits have been filed. No site work has happened. As far as public records show, that land is still sitting empty." I stared at the paper in front of me. "So where did the money go that?" Evelyn said quietly. "Is the question." I didn't call Claire. I couldn't, not after she'd asked me to stop. But 3 days later, she called me. "Dad, I know I said we needed space, but can we talk? In person?" I agreed to meet her at a diner halfway between our houses, neutral ground. When she walked in, she looked tired in a way I hadn't seen since her divorce from Peter. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. "Dad, I need to ask you for something, and I need you not to be angry. I'm listening. Mitchell's fund is short on cash, just temporarily. A permit issue held things up longer than expected, and some investors want their money back before the project even starts. If we can't cover the gap, he could lose everything. The house, the business, all of it." My hands went cold around my own coffee cup. "How much are we talking about, Claire?" $80,000. I sat back in the booth, stunned. "Claire, that's most of my retirement savings. I know it's a lot. But it's a short-term loan, Dad. 90 days, maybe less. He'll pay it back the moment the permits clear. And if the permits don't clear?" She didn't answer right away. "They will. Mitchell says they will." I thought about Patricia's voice on the phone. "Ask your daughter where the money for the down payment actually came from." I looked at my daughter, her eyes pleading, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not from doubt about her love for me, but from the terrible suspicion that she didn't fully understand what she was asking me to walk into. "Claire, where did the money for your new house come from? The down payment?" Her face changed instantly. Just a flicker, but I saw it. "What does that have to do with anything?" "I'm asking a simple question." Mitchell handled it. "Investment returns from an early round of the fund and returns from a project that hasn't broken ground?" Her jaw tightened. "Dad, I don't understand why you're interrogating me right now. I came here because I need your help. I'm not interrogating you, Claire. I'm trying to understand what I'd actually be lending money to. She stood up from the booth so fast her coffee nearly spilled. You know what? Forget it. I shouldn't have come here. Claire, wait. But she was already walking out the door. It started raining again that night, the kind of steady, cold rain that makes a house feel emptier than it is. I sat in my recliner with the television off, replaying the conversation over and over. Something was very wrong. I could feel it the way you feel a storm coming before the sky even changes color, a pressure in the air that your body recognizes before your mind catches up. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Daniel. Dad, Claire told me you grilled her at the diner today. I asked her a question, Daniel. That's not the same as grilling her. She's stressed enough as it is. Mitchell's business is going through a rough patch, and instead of helping, you're interrogating her about a house. I want to help, Daniel. I do, but I'm not going to hand over $80,000 without understanding where it's going. It's going to family, Dad. That should be enough. It's not enough when the family won't answer a simple question. There was a long pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had changed. Colder, sharper than I'd ever heard from him. You know, Dad, Mom would be disappointed in how difficult you're making this. I felt that sentence land like a physical blow, Margaret's name used as a weapon against me by our own son. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare use your mother like that. I'm just saying what's true. You don't get to decide what your mother would think, Daniel. She's not here to speak for herself, and using her memory to pressure me into handing over my savings is beneath you. The line went silent for a moment, then he said, Fine, we'll figure it out without you, and hung up. I sat alone in the dark living room for a long time after that call. I thought about the promise I made Margaret in that hospital room. Keep this family together. But how do you keep a family together when part of that family is asking you to fund something you don't trust and punishing you the moment you ask honest questions? I picked up the photo album again, the one I'd been returning to more and more these past weeks. Daniel's missing teeth, Claire's small hand in mine at her first dance recital. I wondered when exactly the children in these photographs had become people willing to guilt their own father with his dead wife's name. The next morning, I called Evelyn and told her everything. The $80,000 request, Claire's reaction when I asked about the down payment, Daniel's comment about Margaret. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Mr. Hale, I need to tell you something, and I want you to prepare yourself. Go ahead. My associate finished the deeper background check on Highland Ridge Development Partners this morning. I was going to call you later today, but given what you just told me, I think you should hear it now. What did you find? The land the fund claims to be developing was never actually purchased by the fund. It's still owned by its original holder, a farming family who has no agreement with Mitchell Reyes or Highland Ridge. There is no active development deal. There never was. My mouth went dry. Then where did the investor money go? Evelyn's voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. Mr. Hale, based on what we've found so far, it appears your son-in-law used investor funds, including money from at least 3 of his own family members, to purchase the house he and your daughter are currently living in. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table, the phone pressed hard against my ear, the room around me suddenly feeling very far away. And Claire, I whispered, does she know? That, Evelyn said, is what we need to find out, because if she doesn't, Mr. Hale, she's about to lose everything right alongside him. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new text message had just come in. From Claire, I opened it with shaking fingers. It was a single line, sent at 11:47 that morning. Dad, something's wrong. Mitchell's not answering his phone and 2 men just came to the house asking for him. I'm scared. Please call me. I called her back before I even finished reading the message twice. She picked up on the first ring, her voice shaking. Dad, thank God. There were 2 men here from some kind of collection agency. They said Mitchell owes money to people who invested in his fund. They said if he doesn't pay by Friday, they're filing a lawsuit. Dad, what is going on? I closed my eyes. This was the moment I had been dreading and preparing for at the same time. Claire, I need you to sit down, and I need you to listen to me without hanging up. Dad, you're scaring me. I know, I'm sorry. But you need to hear this from me before you hear it from someone else. I told her everything Evelyn had found. the land that was never purchased, the investor money that didn't go where Mitchell said it went, the strong possibility that the down payment on her own house had come from money that wasn't his to take. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Claire, are you there?" "I need to go," she whispered, and hung up. I didn't hear from her for 2 full days. I paced my house, checked my phone every 20 minutes, barely slept. Evelyn called once to update me. The investigation had picked up speed. 2 other investors had come forward independently, confirming what Patricia's warning had suggested. The county fraud division had opened a file. On the 3rd day, Claire showed up at my front door without calling first. Her eyes were red and swollen. She was holding a folder of papers against her chest like a shield. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd built this family's life over 3 decades of dinners and homework and quiet conversations. Claire set the folder down but didn't open it. "I found bank statements," she said quietly, "in Mitchell's office. After you called me, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I looked. And the down payment on our house. It came from an account labeled Highland Ridge Investor Trust." "Dad, that's not his money. That's other people's money. People who trusted him." Her voice broke on the last word. I reached across the table and took her hand, the way I used to when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. "Claire, I need to ask you something honestly, and I need an honest answer. Did you know?" She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "I swear to you, Dad, I didn't know. He told me it was investment returns. He told me the fund was doing well. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I believed her. I had spent 30 years reading people across negotiating tables, and I could see the truth in her face, the specific kind of grief that comes from realizing you built your life on top of someone else's lie." "What about Daniel?" I asked. "Does he know?" Claire wiped her eyes. "Daniel invested too. $15,000, back when Mitchell first started the fund. He convinced 2 of his friends to invest, as well. If this is what you're saying it is, Dad, Daniel's about to lose his own money, and he's going to feel responsible for what happened to his friends." I sat back in my chair, the weight of it settling over the kitchen like the rain that had been falling on and off for weeks. "That explains the pressure on me," I said slowly. "The questions about the house, the trust, the will. Was any of that Daniel's idea, or was it?" "It was Mitchell," Claire said. "He kept telling us we needed to get ahead of things, that we should have the family's assets consolidated in case anything happened to the business. He wanted access to more capital, I think. Looking back, he was trying to use your house as collateral, or convince you to invest the way Daniel did." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The letter from the lawyer, the one asking me to update my estate plan. That was never about protecting the family, was it? Claire shook her head slowly. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry we shut you out. I'm so sorry I told you to stop calling." 2 days later, Claire and I sat across from Evelyn Marsh together. Claire brought copies of every financial document she had found, more than even Evelyn's investigator had uncovered on her own. It turned out Mitchell hadn't just misused Highland Ridge investor funds for the house. He had also taken a second, smaller loan against Claire's name, without fully explaining what she was signing. 6 months into their marriage, Evelyn laid it out plainly. "This is serious, Mr. Hale. Serious enough that I'd advise both of you to cooperate fully with the fraud investigators. Claire, you may be considered a victim in this as much as the other investors, especially if you can demonstrate you didn't know how the funds were obtained. But that means being transparent, completely transparent, starting now." Claire nodded, wiping her eyes again. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Evelyn turned to me. "As for your estate, Mr. Hale, I'd still recommend updating your will, but not in the way your family originally pushed for. I'd recommend a plan that protects your assets from exactly this kind of situation in the future. A trust with clear, specific terms you control, with protections in place so no one can press you into decisions you're not ready to make." "That sounds right," I said. As we stood to leave, Claire turned to me in the hallway outside Evelyn's office. "Dad, where's Daniel in all this? Have you talked to him?" "Not since he brought up your mother on the phone." Claire flinched. "He told me about that. He feels terrible, Dad. He didn't mean it the way it came out. He was scared, and scared people say cruel things." I thought about that for a moment. I understood fear. I understood cruelty born from fear. I had felt both these past 2 months, but understanding something doesn't mean forgiving it instantly. "I'll talk to him," I said, "when I'm ready." 2 weeks later, Mitchell was formally charged with securities fraud and wire fraud, 1 count for each investor he had misled, 11 counts in total. The county fraud division moved faster than any of us expected, largely because 2 other investors, tipped off by the same warnings Patricia had apparently been quietly spreading, had already filed complaints before Claire and I ever came forward. Claire filed for divorce the same week. She moved out of the house, the one purchased with money that was never truly Mitchell's, and into a small apartment near her old neighborhood. It wasn't easy for her. She lost nearly everything she thought she had built over the past 2 years. But for the first time in months, when she called me, her voice sounded like her own voice again, not a voice reciting lines someone else had given her. Daniel called me the following Sunday, the first Sunday call in over 2 months. His voice was quiet, unsteady. "Dad, can I come by? I think we need to talk." I told him yes. He arrived that evening looking older than I remembered, tired in the particular way that comes from carrying guilt you don't know how to put down. We sat in the living room, the same room where Margaret and I had raised him, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. For what I said about Mom, for pushing you toward that lawyer, for not listening when you tried to warn us something felt wrong. Why didn't you listen?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I'd already put $15,000 into Mitchell's fund, and if I admitted something was wrong, I'd have to admit I lost it. It was easier to believe him than to face that." I nodded slowly. I understood pride. I understood the particular shame of admitting you'd been fooled. "I lost almost everything convincing myself I hadn't made a mistake," Daniel continued. "And in the process, I almost lost you too." I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder, the way I used to when he struck out at Little League and needed to know it wasn't the end of the world. "You didn't lose me, Daniel. I'm still here." He looked up at me, his eyes wet. "Even after everything I said?" "Even after everything I said. You're my son. That doesn't stop being true just because you made a mistake." That night, after Daniel left, I sat alone in the living room with the photo album open on my lap one more time. I looked at the pictures of my children as babies, as toddlers, as teenagers standing awkwardly at school dances. I thought about Margaret's voice in that hospital room. "Keep this family together." I hadn't kept it together by staying silent, or by handing over $80,000 without asking questions. I had kept it together by standing my ground long enough for the truth to surface, even when it meant enduring weeks of silence, cruelty, and doubt. I closed the photo album and set it on the side table. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. For the first time in 2 months, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like it was waiting for something. Not an ending, but a beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Dad, Sunday dinner this week? I'll cook. Your favorite." I smiled for the first time in what felt like a very long while and typed back a single word. "Yes." Sunday came and I drove to Claire's small apartment for the first time since she moved in. It wasn't much, 1 bedroom, second-hand furniture, boxes still stacked in the corner of the living room. But there was something different about it. It felt honest. Nothing in that apartment had been bought with a lie. Claire opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been watching for my car from the window. She hugged me longer than usual. "I made the pot roast," she said. "Mom's recipe. I called Aunt Susan for the exact measurements. I wanted to get it right." We ate at a small table by the window, just the 2 of us at first. Halfway through dinner, there was a knock at the door. Daniel stood there holding a bottle of sparkling cider, since none of us felt much like drinking that week. "I hope it's okay I came," he said. "Claire invited me." I looked at my daughter. She shrugged, a small, hopeful smile on her face. I figured it was time we all sat at the same table again. I nodded, and Daniel sat down. For the first time in months, dinner didn't feel like a negotiation or an interrogation. We talked about small things. Daniel's job, Claire's plans to go back to teaching, something she'd given up years ago when she married Mitchell. We didn't talk about the case, not directly, not that night. Some conversations need time to breathe before they're ready to be had. The legal process took nearly 5 months from the day Mitchell was formally charged to the day the case resolved. Evelyn stayed with us through all of it, guiding Claire through the process of separating herself financially and legally from a fraud she never asked to be part of. In the end, Mitchell pleaded guilty to reduce his sentence, avoiding a trial that would have dragged 11 investors, including his own wife and brother-in-law, through months of testimony. He was sentenced to 4 years, with restitution ordered for the investors. Though everyone in that courtroom understood the money itself was mostly gone, spent on a lifestyle built on borrowed time, Daniel got back a portion of his $15,000 through the restitution process. Not all of it, but enough to settle things with the 2 friends he'd convinced to invest. He spent the better part of a year working extra shifts to pay back the rest himself, insisting it was his responsibility, not theirs. I respected that more than I ever told him directly. Claire, cleared entirely of wrongdoing, once the investigators confirmed she had no knowledge of where the down payment money came from, rebuilt slowly. She went back to substitute teaching at first, then found a full-time position the following fall. It wasn't the life she had pictured for herself, but she told me once, over coffee, that it felt more like her own life than the one she'd been living before. As for me, I finally sat down with Evelyn to properly update my will, on my own terms this time, not out of pressure, not out of fear, but out of the same steady love that had guided every decision I'd made for this family since the day Daniel was born. I set up a trust, clear and specific, protecting the house Margaret and I built our life in, protecting my savings, ensuring that whatever I left behind would go to my children the way I intended, without room for anyone else to maneuver around it. I made Claire and Daniel co-executors, together, a small quiet statement that I still believed in them, even after everything. "You didn't have to do that," Daniel said when I told him. "I know," I said. "I wanted to. It's been almost a year now since that first phone call, the one where Claire asked me to stop calling. Looking back, I understand now that it wasn't really her voice asking that of me. It was fear, manipulation, and a man who saw an old widower's steady, quiet love as something to be exploited. I think about Margaret often, especially on Sunday evenings, when the whole family gathers around my kitchen table now, instead of Claire's small apartment. Daniel brings his girlfriend, a schoolteacher named Rosa, who reminds me a little of Margaret, in the way she laughs at her own jokes before she finishes telling them. Claire brings dessert every week now, usually something new she's trying from a recipe book Margaret left behind. Last month I finally called the lawyer who had originally sent that unsolicited letter, the one Mitchell hand-picked all those months ago. I wanted to close the loop, to let them know I'd never be using their services, and to ask, quietly, how many other families they'd been pointed toward under similar circumstances. The woman on the phone got very quiet before telling me she couldn't discuss client referrals. I didn't need her to. Her silence told me enough. Sometimes, late at night, I still take out that photo album. Daniel with his missing teeth, Claire asleep on my shoulder after her recital. But now, next to those old photographs, I keep new ones too. Daniel and Rosa at a 4th of July barbecue. Claire in her classroom, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in her students' handwriting. A picture from last month. All 3 of us standing on the back porch, where Daniel first mentioned my will, laughing about something so small I can't even remember what it was. I think about the promise I made Margaret in that hospital room. Keep this family together. I understand now that keeping a family together doesn't mean staying silent when something feels wrong. It doesn't mean handing over everything you've built just to avoid conflict. Sometimes keeping a family together means standing your ground long enough for the people you love to find their way back to the truth, and to you. If you've made it this far, I want to say something directly to you. If you're an older parent, and your children have ever asked you to sign something, invest in something, or simply hand over control of what you've spent your life building, take a breath before you agree. Ask questions. Get your own advice, from your own people, not the people someone else hands you. And if you're a son or daughter reading this, and you've ever pushed a parent toward a decision that benefited someone else more than it benefited them, I hope you'll think twice the next time. The people who raised you deserve better than being treated like an asset to be managed. My children told me to stop calling. I stopped, and I called my lawyer instead. It felt at the time like the loneliest decision I'd ever made. It turned out to be the decision that saved my family. Where are you watching from tonight? I'd love to know, and if this story meant something to you, stay with me. There are more stories like this one still to tell.